Hey everyone, this is Jay Alders. This is Shifting Perceptions podcast. I'm excited for this one. This is something new I've never tried before. It's an Ask Me Anything style episode. I asked on my social media if you guys had any topics of interest, any questions, any tangents, anything you wanted me to cover or talk about, and I got a lot of really good responses. I can't answer every single one, but I'm going to get to as many as I possibly can, and I hope you guys enjoy this. If you do, let me know. If you have further questions or topics, definitely let me know. Shoot me a DM or an email, and I'll try to do another one of these if you guys are a fan of this style of episode. All of our episodes up until this point have been interview style podcasts, which I love doing, but I thought it might be fun to reach out to you and kind of offer some direct advice or some insights based around your interests. So let's get straight to it. So Lance Anderson on Instagram sent over a question saying, I'm really interested in how to get into licensing my art and getting started with that. He asked a few questions, but we'll start with that one first. And a couple other people also asked about art licensing. So for those of you that don't know, we'll start there. What is art licensing? For artists and musicians and creatives in general, you can think of licensing as creating a contract, an agreement between yourself and usually a brand or a company of some sort, where you're giving usually exclusive or limited rights to use your work. So in my case, I've used my artwork on things like licensed skateboards, licensed surfboards, puzzles, all sorts of different things over the years. Emergency, the vitamin drink that you might have seen in store shelves, or maybe you still use it. Things like that are products that I have licensed my artwork for. And what's cool about it is you either can, it's a very creative process in the business side of things, where you can either do like a lump sum, it's called, where you get paid all at once and you're done, or you can do something where it's like a royalty. For those of you guys that watch Shark Tank, you're familiar with royalties. For each item that's sold, you get a small percentage or a small amount that's made up. And then there's also, combination of those two. You can do an advanced guarantee where you get a certain amount flat guaranteed to you, and then on top of that, royalties. The process itself is really very just as creative as the artwork in many cases. And Lance is asking about how to get started with that. Well, how to get started. There's not really a formulaic way to get started with that, other than getting your artwork, and in my case, getting your artwork known, creating a reputation around yourself and your work, creating a demand. Those are the things I would do first. You could also seek out opportunities, right? So if you think that your artwork might fit on a tea box, let's say, or if your art would look really great on a wine bottle, what I would do is suggest mocking up those things with your artwork and sending it out to 5 or 10 different companies or brands a day, and basically pitch them. Say, hey, I'm an artist. I think my art would look great on your product. I think my art would look great on a product line, perhaps. And then pitch yourself to companies, basically the 21st century version of cold calling. For those of you guys around before the internet took off, there was a thing called cold calling, where you just sit there all day long, which I used to do, and just call people out of the blue. Hey, can I help you? Can you use my services? So if you don't have a reputation that kind of carries you forward or creates the demand to get people knocking on your door, what you really have to do is seek out those opportunities. What I would tell you not to do is don't just make art and expect people to flock to you. People meaning collectors, people meaning companies and brands. So I'm always of the nature of being a little bit more offensive with that. That being said, once you get to that point, you really have to get your contractual, let's call it logistics, in order. So definitely contact either a lawyer or look online. There's lots and lots of forms you can use that you can purchase or find online for agreements. So I hope that helps with getting started with art licensing. I'm also available for coaching. If you get to the point where you need help, I am available for that. Let's see, getting on to the next question Lance had. I'm also interested in knowing how you got started doing work for bands and how to get into that as well. I'm in the middle of transitioning careers after being a pottery teacher for 26 years due to severe back injury, and now using my art as a way to cope and hopefully start to augment my disability retirement. Cool. Not cool that you're disability, but cool that you want to move forward with your artwork in a way that might help you out. That's very cool. I hope you are hope you recover and do well with your disability situation. But how to get started with doing work for bands? A lot of people ask that. I would ask you, if you were sitting next to me, I'd say, well, why do you want to get involved with bands? Some people, when I ask them that in person, like if I get asked at an art show and someone says, hey Jay, how do you get started working with these bands? And I might say to them, well, why do you want to? Typically, it's a couple of different responses I get, either because they think or assume that the money is fantastic working with bands, or because they just want the social connection / street cred that might be involved, or maybe just the excitement of it, the alleged excitement around doing that. So I would really try to figure that part of it out first. Working with bands is super fun. I have made some great friends and great connections and had amazing opportunities working with bands. So I could see why that might be something that you might want to know about. How do you get started? Similar way, really. Number one, if you are an established artist with a following, generally, over time, they'll seek you out. If you make yourself known as an artist that's great at doing band posters, people will find you. But you really have to get your work out there regularly, hashtag the crap out of it, get kind of known in those circles. There are so many Facebook groups and so many, Twitter groups and Instagram accounts based around band posters or album art. There's lots of these really niche groups and websites and Instagram feeds. Become known in those, but really build a portfolio of work that looks like you know what you're doing. If it was me first starting out with that, again, I would do work and either mock up a band's information on there, their logo, or I would probably do work for free for bands, probably smaller bands at first, just to get the experience, just to learn the dynamic between working with someone else, kind of guiding you and sort of directing the project. That's a tricky thing in itself. So I would start with smaller bands and either do it for free or very cheap, so you're kind of amassing a portfolio. And once you get 5 or 10 really amazing either album covers or band posters, that's enough to kind of really show you know what you're doing. And at that point, again, pitch yourself every single day. 5 or 10 bands every single day, DM them, email them, wait a week or two, do it again. Different ones every single day, just constantly do that. Don't wait around for things to happen for you. So many people will wait for opportunity. I'm more of the mindset of building the door yourself and then opening it. So I hope that helps a little bit. Rhonda, a lot of you guys, I recognize your names from social media, but I don't say them out loud. So if I screw up your name, I'm sorry. I do recognize, your names from social media. Rhonda A. Shadle or Shaddle. I'm sorry, I might be butchering your name, Rhonda. But you say, I love that you paint live during concerts. Thank you. You say, I love music and makes whatever I'm doing at the moment more enjoyable. There you go. How do you feel and how does that differ when you paint in your studio? Can your kids come in whenever they want? Good questions. So you basically want to know, all right, how do you feel and how does it differ when you paint in your studio? So the big difference with that is when I'm painting in my studio, usually it's a much more tedious process. There's no time deadline. There's no restrictions. There's no strong deadlines when I'm working in my studio, which is where I am now. And that's a much, much different vibe than working at a live show where I have to create an entire painting from start to finish within like an hour and a half. That having a hard deadline like that, you're done when the band stops generally. So that's sort of both really, really stressful, but it's also sort of liberating because artists listening, you can sort of relate to like the mindset of when you're painting, you're like, when is it done? Like you never really know when the piece is done. I'll work on it another day, another 5 hours, another 2 weeks. But when you're at a concert painting live for a band in front of a giant audience, there's both the excitement of almost feel like it feels like I'm actually in the band at that moment. Like I usually walk on with them, I usually walk off with them. They're doing their guitar solos next to me, they're singing next to me. It's as close as I've ever come to like being in an actual band. So it's very exciting, but it also has that stress of like there's a lot of people watching what I'm doing. So there is that. So it's sort of like, I would imagine it's the same for a gigging musician. I would imagine it's a similar vibe. But I also like the fact that I can finish the process, then and there and be done with it. And then it's just, no matter what stage it's in, it's done. You also ask about, can my kids just walk in when I'm working in my studio? Not usually. Usually I lock the door, close the door. I kind of need my space. Sometimes, though, I will leave the door open upstairs and they'll come down and hang out with me. If I want them to do that, or if I'm cool with them doing that, I'll leave the door open. And a lot of times I'll see my my little 7.5 twin-year-old boys or my 9-year-old daughter like sneaking around like little ninjas. I'll see their little head, past my table or my desk, and they'll try to sneak past me, which is always fun. But I do a lot of times bring them down here purposely, and we'll set up other easels, and we'll do painting sessions together, drawing, painting, sculpture, all different sorts of mediums. They even have brought their friends down here, and we set a bunch of easels up, and I really enjoy that. That's really fun. My old neighbor, Dave Richter, who on Facebook, what's up, Dave? On Facebook asked a bunch of questions, and in true Dave fashion, some of them are very bizarre, some of them are interesting. I'll crack me up, dude. What does the future hold? I'm not going to get into that. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? I was thinking about this in the car. I had read your question earlier, and I was like, how the heck can I answer that? I think each part of life, each part of reality has its own meaning. On a cellular level, I think the meaning is like reproduction and survival and health. And I think even on a macro level, a lot of our day-to-day lives are governed by survival, reproduction, health, those sort of very base things. If you're getting on like a spiritual level or a mental level or emotional level, there's different answers for that. So I don't know if there's like a meaning of life. I kind of look at each aspect of life as having its own sort of meaning, and I try to balance all those different sides of me. My spiritual side, I try to make sure I feel connected. My mental side, I try to make sure it's healthy and strong. My emotional side, I try to make sure it's in touch with where I am, and all the different sides of me have different meanings. That has nothing to do with being an artist, but it was a fun one to talk about. So there. How can we unify general relativity and quantum theory? I have some thoughts on that. Maybe we'll talk about in person, but not right now. Will AI replace artists? Probably. It sucks to say that. Someone else asked about AI in a few questions from now, so maybe I'll dive more into that. But to start it out, I think that AI is going to take over a lot of artists' jobs, which kind of sucks. It's also inevitable and unavoidable. And I also think that artists will always be able to offer something that is uniquely different from AI. But I think a lot of artist jobs are really screwed. I think a lot of artists that make their living by doing little kind of filler art, whether it's for a company's flyers or logos or illustrations or things like that, are really going to be in trouble. So it's definitely very concerning, and I don't really know how it's stoppable. Your sixth question, Dave. Can your art translate into 3D sculpting? Yes, 100%. I don't do a lot of sculpting anymore. I used to. I don't think I don't really share that side of my work much. But when I'm painting, in my brain and as I'm painting, I often, not always, but often, sort of feels more like I'm sculpting than painting. When I'm shading or when I'm creating shadows, in my brain I'm sort of 3D modeling the scene, and I kind of mix my sculpting side of my brain with the side of me that loves photography, where I'm creating lighting scenarios. And yes, very much. Like for me, like creating 3D work and painting is very intertwined. You also ask, will my art become an animation? That would be cool. I have done a little bit of animation, not a lot, a very little bit. Would it be cool someday? It would be cool. I don't put a lot of thought into it though. Eric Baker on Facebook. What kind of music do you actually listen to? You know what? If you saw my Spotify list, which I actually think I shared at some point, like my Wrapped 2022 favorite songs, it's like across the board. It really depends on my mood. I love classic rock. That's probably one of the genres I listen to most. I listen to a lot of stuff like Zeppelin, Beatles, Doors, Pink Floyd, a lot of that stuff. But I also listen to a ton of like gangster rap. I listen to a lot of jazz, tons of jazz. Like very, very often I'm listening to like a Miles Davis type radio mix on Spotify. I love jazz a lot. But I also love, Frank Sinatra type music. I love big band stuff. I love Spanish music a lot. Classical music, I like that quite a bit. Metal, I love Metallica. I'm not a huge metal fan, but I do love Metallica and System of a Down, a few other bands. I love alternative music. I love like Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam. I love tons of bands, but I listen to really everything. You could put almost any genre on, almost, and I'll jam out to it. Let's see. Alex Montiel, I hope I'm not screwing your name up, Alex, on Facebook said or asked, I would love to hear your thoughts on the future of NFTs and the intersection of art and the blockchain. Yeah, I've definitely got thoughts on that. So I think a lot of people outside of like blockchain conversations or outside of like the NFT space are very confused slash annoyed slash, perplexed, throw in a couple other adjectives about NFTs and blockchain, and it's understandable because there's been a lot of hype, and then it all crashed, came crashing down. I look at NFTs as more of like a technology more than anything else. People have different views on that, but NFTs is a non-fungible token, and which basically means a unique item that's on the blockchain. And so I think of like NFTs as like a digital authentication, also a digital collectible or a digital piece of art that can be verified using the blockchain, using the technology behind NFTs. If I lost you already, sorry guys, we can definitely talk more about NFTs, but I don't want to get too deep into it. But I do think NFTs are here to stay. However, I think they are going to change. We're not going to necessarily call them NFTs. I think the technology will eventually sort of merge into other things, much in the way that digital music, if you're old enough to remember the mid-90s, at first it was like digital music, MP3s. Like no one refers to like music as digital music anymore. No one refers to like your Spotify stuff as MP3s. I think the terms are going to change and the technology is going to become so transparent that it'll be blockchain technology and collectibles and art and other types of things you can sell on the blockchain, but we won't even realize that it came from NFTs. So that's as far as the technology goes. As far as the art goes, I think that's also here to stay. I think that it's going to, evolve, but I think that people that buy the right art using NFTs, whatever that means for you, I'm obviously very bullish on my work, but people that buy the proper assets that have demand long term will see the space change, the technology change. I think eventually we're all going to have some sort of device or devices in our house, much like we all have an iPhone or we all have a Samsung or Google phone. I think we're going to have either like an iFrame or like something in our house or home, wherever, where all these digital assets can move around with us or be used in such a seamless way that it'll just make sense. Carrie Trust Kamen. Carrie, I see your name all the time. I know you're very active on my Facebook. Thank you. And I'm sure that I also screwed up your last name. Sorry about that, Carrie. But Carrie, thanks for connecting with me. And you said, I'm interested in your process when you paint live. Another live painting question. Do you know what you're going to paint ahead of time? How does the music influence your painting, and do you sell them? So this is a slightly different question about live painting, which I think is fun to talk about. Do you know what you're going to paint ahead of time? Usually not. I've done both. I've done live paintings where I like over prepared. I sketched. I spent hours and hours sketching, and then working stuff up digitally, and then traced it onto the canvas ahead of time, and like had a whole color mock-up so like as I'm painting live I can theoretically look at it and compare. I've done that. What I enjoy more, much more, and what I think turns out better is when I go up there with zero plan, which for someone that's not an artist might seem bizarre or almost like, how do you do that? But like for me, I would rather kind of wing it, and just go up there and start painting and see what happens and let the music sort of take over and just guide me. Like I said before, doing the live painting with the band is sort of the closest as I come to being in a band. There's a big difference, though. If you're in a band, you rehearse the songs, you play the songs a million times, you could play them in your sleep. When I'm up there and when I don't have a plan, it's the first time I'm coming up with this piece. You're actually seeing the work being created, which I think is really cool because it's directly being influenced by the music, by the energy of the audience. So I do both. I have done pieces where I sketch it out, but I find that it's looser and more fun when I don't do that, if that makes sense. And the music definitely does influence me. I'll find that if I'm painting with a band and the bass or the drums are going crazy, I usually will catch myself, not purposely, but catch myself, like my brush moving with the beat. And that definitely has a direct impact of the music is sort of turning into the art. Your last question was, do you sell them? Yes, I definitely do. Thankfully, most of the live paintings that I do usually sell by the end of the show. If not, usually they're pretty soon after. I have a couple that are still left on my site, I believe, but they usually sell pretty quickly, thankfully. I'm really happy about that, especially when someone buys it that was in the audience. That's like a special connection right there. Next question comes from Hugo Jesus dos Reis. I hope I said your name okay. Can we talk a bit about AI and art styles? Let me see what else I can add that I have not said already about AI. I think it's not going away. I think it's amazing technology. Like the nerdy side of me loves seeing what's going on with AI. I think AI is remarkable, and I think for science, for the STEM topics, for science and for technology and engineering and mechanics and medicine and all these other hard sciences, I think AI is going to put us as a society so far ahead. It's not going anywhere. I could sit here and argue saying I don't like it, or there's things about it that I don't like, but it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, you can right now go online on a site or use an app. It can write lyrics for you. I've seen AI songs coming that sound just like Nirvana, Jimi Hendrix. You can literally ask the AI to make a painting that looks like Van Gogh and Dali made a painting together of any subject you want, and it looks convincingly like they did. So that's sort of both amazing and scary, and it is sad and inevitable that a lot of artists are going to lose their work, lose their jobs in the process, and I think a lot of other artists will use it as a tool in some way. It also concerns me because I think art as a whole, I think the standards are fading away, so almost anything can pass for art now. Like famously, everyone always says everything is art. Everything is art. Everything is not art in my opinion per se, but I guess to some people that's subjective. So some people will use AI as a tool. Some people will give up trying to understand it, maybe stop making art, which is unfortunate. And it's going to happen the same with music. It's going to happen the same with acting. We're going to see movies that are like Avatar, where they won't have actors. It'll just be voice AI, visually AI. And then once, like Oculus or MetaQuest, whatever it's called now, VR, I have one over here somewhere. They're amazing. AI and VR and AR are definitely here to stay. It's very cool. Scary also. Roland Bernardine. Roland Bernardine. I think I said that okay. Asks, besides waves, what other subjects inspire you to create? This is a cool thing to bring up, and I thank you for doing that, because I love painting oceans, and I love painting nature, and I love painting surfing, and that's pretty much what my art career kind of launched with. So I definitely have a place in my heart to keep doing that. That being said, I love painting so many other things besides that, and it's both like nice, but also kind of like very limiting to be known as like a surf artist. I feel like I look at myself as just being an artist or just a fine artist. I don't think of myself, aside from, marketing myself, I don't think of myself as like a surf artist per se, even though a lot of what I do is that. I like to paint things or people or situations or scenes that inspire me. So surfing or ocean scenes are one of the things of many that sort of linger in my brain, right? So if I see like a really beautiful woman or a really beautiful sunset, or if I envision a scene that kind of just stays in there and rolls around and makes me think of it, or kind of just stays with me, those are the things that I like to paint. Sometimes those things are really intangible, and I've been painting more abstract pieces. That's really fun for me too, because a lot of even my surf pieces, if you look up close, have a lot of really stylized abstract elements to it. And sometimes that thing is not necessarily just something that I see or something I saw or something I experienced or something I envision. Sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's an energy. And I really like to paint energy. That energy could be light, colors, shapes. I like distorting proportions. But I like to paint anything really, as long as it feels soulful and real, and as long as there's a connection there, as long as I feel like I'm sort of connected to the subject matter or the vision, that's what I like to paint. It doesn't have to necessarily be an ocean or a wave or a surfer. It could be, I love doing figurative work. I love all sorts of things, lots and lots of stuff. I don't like to be pigeonholed. And truth be told, a lot of the artists that paint in similar genres as me, a lot of like the other like air quotes like surf artists that I know, if you get to know them and talk to them outside of their social media, will also say similar things, that they also like to paint other stuff. It's just a lot of times we get sort of pigeonholed or sort of get handcuffed to a certain genre, and just like a band, like generally a band keeps playing the same music that their audience wants to hear. That doesn't mean that's the only thing they want to play per se. Okay, so the next one, Jessica Lynn on Facebook. Advice on how to find your niche and make your part-time gig a full-time career. Whew, that's a big one. Well, let's start with the beginning. How to find your niche. I think your niche finds you. If niche means your style or your subject matter that you're known for, I think it sort of should just kind of happen. I mean, you could reverse engineer it. A lot of people that talk about art from a more business standpoint might say, like, look what market there might be, or look what audience there is, and create something for them. That's not my jam. That's not the artist's advice I would give, although it could work. For me, I like painting from a more spiritual and intuitive place, a more soulful place. So I'm more of the mindset of paint, draw, make music, do your thing, whatever feels right to you, whatever feels authentic and genuine to you. And if you do it enough, like if you're painting or drawing or writing songs enough, over a period of like a few months or a few years, you'll see a pattern there. There will be something there that is uniquely you. When you get to know your medium, your craft enough, there is just something there that, in your case, just becomes very Jessica, right? In my case, like there's certain pieces or certain styles or certain colors or certain way I move my brush or my work has a certain flow to it that people might say looks very much like a Jay Alders, people will say. I'm not talking about myself in the third person. I'm just saying other people might say that looks like, my work, right? So that becomes your niche, I think, whatever feels the most genuine to you, right? As far as making your part-time gig a full-time career, I think here's the advice. You could either do what I did, which is sort of just jump into it. I literally quit my full-time business that paid for all my bills, and I went from having a really solid business that was paying my mortgage and everything, and I literally dropped it, and I had no choice but to make my art work. Literally had no choice. If I didn't make my art work, my bills would not be getting paid. So you can do that. It's very stressful and it's really hard. It's not necessarily the advice I'd give to someone starting out, especially if you're older or have kids or have serious expenses that you don't feel like you can handle elsewhere. I would say make your part-time gig a full-time career by keeping it part-time. Make it your side hustle, and eventually, hopefully, if your part-time income starts to outweigh your full-time career, then it's just common sense. You just shift over. I don't think you could just jump into it, but I think you should, if that's your goal, you should look at it and treat it like it's a full-time career. You should treat it mentally, like not skimping out. You should put the work in, get a little bit less sleep if you need to, stop watching so much TV, stop gossiping, stop watching reality shows. And I'm not speaking to you personally. I'm just saying in general, stop wasting time, I would tell someone, and focus all of your attention and energy and obsess to the point where you're like an OCD freak, like obsess over your career, obsess over your dreams, obsess over what you want to do. That's the sort of seriousness you should put into it if you want to make it a full-time career. Now, if you just want to make it your art and you just want to make it a fun side hobby, or you want to keep it fun and take the pressure off of you, then take the career thing out of your head, because it really does put a lot of stress on not only you, but it stresses your creativity when you put too much pressure on it. Jen Moore said, I'd love to hear advice on how to make a living as an artist, how to get your artwork out there to sell, and the systems you use. So this is sort of a similar question, so I grouped them together. But how to get your artwork out there, I will tackle that one. So I guess I would first, if you were here with me and Jen, and you said, Jay, how do I get my artwork out there? I would say to you, what does out there mean to you? To one artist, getting your work out there might mean the coffee shop that's around the corner. To someone else, getting your work out there might mean on an album cover. To someone else, it might mean on like a product that you see at Target, right? So like first figure out what out there means to you. How do you define out there? How do you define success? What does that mean for you? Figure out your grand vision, like ultimately, like in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, I want it to be here, right? Start, a little lower while keeping that in the back of your head. I want this giant vision, but let's start here, right? And I would say start, again, going back to the cold calling thing, every single day, you should be pitching yourself and your work to companies, to brands, to coffee shops, to galleries, to anything, any event, any organization, any band, anyone who uses art, could use art, displays art. Again, we're focusing on art, but maybe you're a musician. Same sort of advice goes out to you, right? You take your thing and you say, hey, where can my thing go? How can it contribute? How can it affect people? and you look for opportunities, and you literally bang down doors. You knock on doors, you open store doors, you peek your head in a store and say, hey, are you, can I just display my work? You figure out ways to get it out there. The problem that I see most often is people, they don't usually have like the balls or the comfort level of like reaching out to people in a soliciting type of a way. But if you are so confident that your work is good and can affect people in a positive way, I don't ever feel weird about sharing something that I'm super, super confident about or am in love with, right? Like I would never feel weird about bragging about my kids to a stranger, right? I would never feel weird about sharing my artwork to someone that I didn't know, because to me, I so love my kids and I so love my work, right? It doesn't feel weird to share that excitement at all. I think a lot of artists are insecure and they don't necessarily feel that level of love. So I think the first thing to do is accept that your work and yourself are worthy of the attention, right? You also asked about the systems I use. That's a little more boring. If you had more specific question on that, I would touch upon it. I do have a lot of systems. Systems are important, but the other stuff that we talked about is more important. So stick to that. On Instagram, at soul_slide. Didn't you also work on the art for Indo boards? Maybe tell us about your art in the industry and your partnerships in the community. Yes, I recently did a licensing agreement with IndoBoard. Remember, one of the first questions was about licensing. I did a board for Indo boards. I over the years, many years, I became friends with Hunter, the owner of Indo boards, and for years, like literally maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years, him and I had loosely talked about, hey, we got to get your art on an Indo board. And it just never, the timing never meshed up. I was super busy. He didn't necessarily know what he wanted. The variables, just didn't link up, And eventually it got to the point where we both, he knew kind of the direction he wanted to go in. I had the time. And we put together a licensing agreement. And, like I said, I became friends with Hunter over many years. He was at my wedding. I'm friendly with the IndoBoard crew. They're a great company. And so, yeah, I have a licensed board with IndoBoard. You can go on indoboard.com. You look up, I think the model is called Splash. And you could see my artwork on there, which is definitely like it's like a dream come true. IndoBoards have been part of my home since probably 2010. They've, in my living room, my kids balance on them. Been at every party in my house I've ever had for, 10 years or more. So it's really super exciting. You asked about the art in the industry and your partnerships in the community. I think I talked about a lot about the partnership stuff before, so I don't want to go into that again. And then your last question was your surf history. Where are you from? How long have you been surfing? What are you riding now? I am from and still live in the Jersey Shore, New Jersey, at the beach. I'm about a mile away from the ocean. I grew up here. I spent a little time in northern Florida, which was awesome. What's up to my North Florida friends and family? Love you guys. But most of my life I've been in New Jersey at the Jersey Shore. So that's where I am now. As far as what I'm riding now, I mostly am riding my longboard, mostly. Pretty much because the summertime on the East Coast, we generally don't get great waves in the summertime. The water's nice and warm and it's fun. So I usually just get out on my longboard. If the waves are a little bit bigger, I'll bust my shortboard out. I have custom boards from COS Boards, Clean Ocean Surfing, I believe is what it stands for. What's up, Tony? And yeah, how long have I been surfing? I started surfing, I think I was like 16 or 17. As soon as I got my my driver's license, I started surfing. I've been skateboarding my whole life, like since I was 3 or 4. So always skateboarding, then got into snowboarding and surfing once driving was in the picture. Sonia Hansen Poole, what helps inspire you most? Man, that's a tough one because I see people talk about, advice like just, sit in front of your instrument or draw a little bit each day or paint every day, even if you're not inspired. And that definitely helps and that definitely works. I feel like if you just do it every day, the inspiration will find you for sure. However, I don't always follow that. A lot of times I don't paint or draw unless I feel inspired. I'm kind of in that camp. So what inspires me? I feel like when I have fulfilling and inspiring experiences, that's when I generally feel most inspired. So if I'm having fun, if I'm going to the beach, if I'm with my family, if I'm taking trips, if I'm, having soulful, passionate experiences, things that make me happy, then generally inspiration kind of comes to me. Okay, let's see. So, let's see. My old college roommate, Dan Lipper, what's up, Dan? Asks, it's time to delve into allowing the artistic process to be guided by different factors. Maybe someone commissioned to work on a subject that you had never before considered drawing. Thoughts on how it all comes to fruition? This is a fun question, and Dan is famously known for asking good questions. So let me see. How do I rephrase this? So basically, getting commissioned by someone, a collector, a band, or someone, to do something that maybe I never normally would have done. This happens a lot. If I'm working with a band or if I'm commissioned by a collector, hey, can you paint this thing or this scene? Sometimes it's just not something that I'm either into or initially am into, or it's something that I'm like, this is out of my comfort zone, or it's something that I'm like, not really my thing, and I wouldn't necessarily draw or paint or design that if I wasn't sort of, being handed some money to do so. That's just part of reality of my job. All the artists that I know most well are artists that have similar situations. Musicians also, I know a lot of musicians that also do commission work, so it's a similar vibe. And how it all comes to fruition, for me, what I find works best, I'm trying to think how to word this, is getting to know the subject matter almost like it's a person, if that makes sense. So like if I'm being given this scene or this subject and it's not something that I'm super comfortable with or don't know, or it's not my forte, I try to do a lot of research. So I might watch videos or look at photos or do a bazillion sketches. Eventually, over a period of time, I'll sort of get comfortable with the subject matter. I'll sort of find something in it that I never saw before. It kind of gives me an opportunity to get to know the subject in almost like a personified way. Like maybe, for instance, I recently got commissioned to do an octopus piece, an octopus painting. I've always wanted to paint an octopus painting. However, I might not have done it because it was actually pretty difficult to get it the way I wanted. But what I did is I watched movies and documentaries and all sorts of things about octopi, and to the point where I felt so comfortable with their forms that it sort of gave me creative permission to bend and change the perspective a little bit and sort of play with it. I find that when I'm trying to do a subject matter or a scene that I don't know really well, I don't feel as comfortable playing with it. It's not as fun. I find that having fun with it, finding a way to have fun with it, the process and the subject matter, that sort of leads to a really good result. And quite often when I'm done with it, by the end of it, not only do I have a piece that I'm really proud of, but I usually find that I learned something. I kind of like broke free of the boundaries that I had previously. So last name on this, I'm probably gonna screw up your last name, Kyle. So Kyle, Cwynr, Quinar, Kyle. Anyway, Kyle, on Instagram. Thank you for your question. When you start a project, you envision it done and try to get yourself to create what you are picturing. I like this. Or do you start in a direction and let it take you to the final product? I'm going to read that again. When you start a project, you envision it done and try to get yourself to create what you are picturing, or do you start in a direction and let it take you to the final product? Yes, to both. It's kind of like a back and forth thing. A lot of times I'll start in a lot of directions, and quite often it takes me nowhere, which is very frustrating and very tedious. A lot of times people don't see the painting until after it's done, or the piece I'm working on until it's done, and they say, oh, it looks like it took no effort, or it looks like it just, I could never do that because it would blah, blah, blah. It would take me so long. And people don't realize it does take so long. And so what I generally will do is start, usually, not all the time, start in a lot of different directions, see where it goes. Eventually something sort of like sticks, something sort of pulls me in, and like some piece of what I've worked on is almost like a visual anchor. It's something that kind of snags me, and it shows me the direction it wants to go in, and then I will quite often follow down that path and see where it goes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I have to start all over again. Sometimes the original piece that pulled me in turns out to be a piece that doesn't actually work at all. It was more like bait. It was more like something that pulled me in to show me something else. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a very emotional experience. It's very torturous at times. It feels like I know what I'm doing, and I'm so connected, and then it might feel like I'm the worst artist in the world and it's going nowhere, and what am I doing? And I'll start over again, and I'll think maybe I should get a job at an office or go work at 7-Eleven or something, and then it's like all of a sudden the piece connects me again, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so inspired. I totally feel it. I see it. It's right there. It's amazing. This is not going to take me more than a day. And then like 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, it might take me another month. So it's a lot of back and forth stuff like that. So that is that, guys. That you had some great questions. I hope you enjoyed this Ask Me Anything, my first Ask Me Anything episode. If you guys want to contribute a question or topic for another episode like this in the future, I would love to try to do that. And thank you for listening, guys. Thank you for the support. Thank you for being so cool and allowing me to do what I do for a living. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm so grateful. I wish you guys all a happy new year. Sending you so much love. Thank you.